Welcome to We're Not Wizards. We are the best, but not wizards. Enjoy the show!
Episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for August. And I was going to say, well, the hot weather's here, but it's not. It's been dreadful. It's been raining all the time. It's like, I don't know about you, but like in the literally the last couple of days I've been able to go out and cut my lawn. It was like going through some kind of jungle, and I had to set my lawnmower at the highest level and then go through it, and then I had to set my lawnmower the next level down and then go through it. And it was hungry work. It was so I got so hungry at some point, I decided, you know what, I need something substantial. So I went, got myself a sandwich, but not just any sandwich. I went to a place where you place your order and you watch a very, very stressed person deal ingredients onto a counter. And some halfway through, they made a mistake and all you could hear them say was crumbs. And I wondered if they had enough wisdom to keep on with the job. I wasn't sure if they did have enough wisdom, but I know somebody who does have enough wisdom from the company Minerva Games, which is to do with the goddess of wisdom themselves. They're a bit of a colourful character. You may say you might want to have a little bit of a swatch at their previous games. But here to talk about Crumbs, the sandwich filler game, I have got Scott Lowe-James.
Hello.
But nobody in your life has ever introduced you by doing a low bit of your...
That is a new one, but also that is a new part of my name, so you could be starting something there.
I think you could introduce yourself. I think it would be an icebreaker, wouldn't it? Because you don't get people kind of introducing themselves. It's like, what's your name? My name's Richard. My name's Richard Simpson, and that's it. But what I get is it Simpson with a P, and I was like saying, I never really understand why people need to potentially ask the spelling of, one of the most famous surnames. I have actually said in the past, it's like, yeah, you spell it just like the yellow guys on TV. And then and then people sometimes stare at me and it's like, yes, the TV show. And it's like, look, let me just write the thing down for you, for goodness sake. We're at a kind of an exciting point in the campaign because Crumbs, the sandwich filler game, has crossed, unless I've cursed it and it's gone back down again, has crossed the magical place of £8,500.
Yes, yeah, it has. Which is not somewhere where I thought I'd be, like, one day into the campaign.
But at the same were you expecting it? Have you done... we'll cover some other stuff because this is what we do. We kind of jump around like a frog on a kind of a hot tin roof with tap shoes trying to get the perfect rhythm. But, mood and camp, are you really kind of surprised and going, oh my goodness, I thought I would be kind of like, well, I need to do this, I need to post this on social media, I then need to kind of keep messaging the backers, I need to be jumping from Instagram to Facebook and checking my emails and stuff like that and still be kind of the marketing head just to make sure we get funded? And are you kind of now going, I'm not sure what I'm meant to do?
I actually, like, after the campaign launch, I actually took a break yesterday, which
wow.
Yeah, that tells you a little bit of where I was. I was actually able to go along to a playtesting session.
Wow. Okay.
Just for a couple of hours, just to kind of relax a bit and then come back. But yeah, I've kind of yo-yoed all over the place with that wonderful imposter syndrome, just kind of yanking you back every time you get any type of confidence. A lot of the stuff in the run up to the campaign was looking really good.
Yeah.
People were responding to the game really well.
Yeah.
Got loads of people signing up for it, and then like the 2 days before the campaign launched was just torture. I'd convinced myself that we were going to struggle. I was going to have to pull out all the stops to make sure that we kind of equaled my previous campaign or something like that. And then we pressed the button. I did a little live stream launch party.
Yeah.
Because I thought it might help distract me from the anxiety of waiting for that first pledge to come in. Yeah. And by the time the launch party was done, in half an hour we were funded, and it just kept going.
I remember that. I remember watching the Cora Quest. The first time Cora Quest was kind of on Kickstarter. And I tuned into the live stream, and we knew something was going to happen. And there was a generally a really good buzz about the campaign, and I think they managed to kind of fund within 45. I think it was 45 minutes. I think they were going to do a live stream of half an hour, and then it just as you've probably witnessed yourself, you just see the numbers kind of creeping up, and it keeps going up and up and up. It's like a totalizer on some kind of game show. Here's what you're going to win. And I think they kind of just waited and went, well, I mean, what's another 15 minutes, folks? Should we just wait and see? And it obviously kind of went along and kind of funded. I understand where your anxieties come from, because your background with the first game that you launched, which was Swatch, you had 2 attempts at kind of getting Swatch funded, and the first one, I think, the first one kind of only made a couple of thousand, and then
I think so.
The second attempt was busting through and 400% funded, which just goes to show there is no art to Kickstarter. It seems to be once you gain momentum, you seem to kind of be there.
Yeah, I mean, the weirdest thing was that my first funding for Swatch and my second was 6 weeks apart.
That's weird.
Because I knew I kind of was able to quite quickly identify what was wrong with the campaign, and it wasn't the game, because the reviews had come in pretty solid.
Yeah,
I was happy with that.
Yeah.
There's something that wasn't and all the people who had played it at conventions turned up for the Kickstarter. It was all the people who didn't know anything about the game. Mm-hmm. They weren't seeing something on the Kickstarter that was kind of making them go, oh yeah, I want that. So yeah, I was able to kind of go back and retool it to just look a lot prettier, and just make it a bit more attractive to backers who don't know me. And yeah, 6 weeks later we relaunched and broke 10k.
And about 560 people kind of joined you on the journey and kind of got you there. But in terms of your kind of journey with, because we'll now, obviously, as I say, jumping around.
Little hop and a skip.
You're kind of, it's kind of, your involvement in the tabletop. You're not just somebody who's rocked up with an idea and said, right, okay, let's do this. You've kind of been involved in the kind of the playtesting scene for a little while. Kind of set that up at the Ludicrous. So, how did you get involved in that? I mean, I take it you must have been playing games. You've been playing board games for some time before you kind of got involved in that.
Board games, weirdly enough, no.
All right.
It's actually a fairly recent development. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're still talking. 6 or 7 years now. Yeah. But I've been playing tabletop games since I was 9. Mm-hmm. Warhammer and miniature games, and then I went through the inevitable card game phase at university.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I worked in the miniature wargaming industry, which is what moved me down to London, out of the rural delights of Lincolnshire,
right?
And delights being used very loosely there.
This almost Scott's currently doing inverted commas with this.
And it was there that I started to play modern board games, and then yeah, I got involved kind of with a something on the side, as it were, to develop and publish board games. So I started playing modern board games roughly about the same time that I started developing them.
Wow.
Which is quite a steep learning curve.
Does that give you a slight advantage in that you're able to kind of approach it as a blank canvas without any kind of ideas that have gone before, without prejudice of ideas? Because I can imagine one of the things that anybody in any kind of creative kind of design space is, you go, oh, this is excellent. I've just created this kind of wonderful kind of pick up and deliver game, and then somebody goes, oh, just like this game, or it's like, oh, and what you're going to do is we're going to grab the jewels, and is it just like this game? And so I can imagine sometimes you think, well, I don't want, am I leaning too heavily on other kind of designs that have already gone out there? Whereas I can imagine if you're just kind of getting involved in the hobby at the same time, you wouldn't necessarily, it might not stop you from going ahead and developing an idea that you might think other people have already done already.
I think there's, like, I'm a big advocate for a certain amount of ignorance when it comes to design. I think it is good to have, I guess, a few kind of blind spots, which does allow you that kind of extra bit of creativity. I've had, in my kind of early stages of designing games and coming up with ideas, I've kind of had, an insomnia fueled night where I've come up with a great idea for a game, only to realise the next day that it's actually a fully published game.
Just fever dreaming it.
But then, on the other hand, I've also come up with an idea, usually theme driven, around a game.
All right, okay.
Which then informs like the mechanism, which leads me to realise that it's actually something fairly innovative. Sounds maybe a bit pretentious, but it's something that's not your standard kind of worker placement or card drafting type game. And I'm still working on one actually that was maybe one of my first few ideas, which I'm fairly sure there's not many games like it.
Yeah.
And it's different enough that I'm happily still working on it and trying to find that sweet spot for it.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, I do like, and with some games as well, sometimes I advise people, if they're like, oh, I want to make this kind of game.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll go, okay, well, what you want to do is you want to play this game, because this does this mechanism best.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would say, don't play any of those games. Just make what you think it should be like, and when you're a certain kind of distance along the design, then go back and play some of like the key games in that mechanism, and then you can see, oh, actually, no, I like this bit, but my game does this that others don't, and then you can kind of make a bit of a mix and match. But you don't want all of your decisions to essentially just go, here's the three biggest worker placement games, I'm going to take this from that one, this from that one, and that from that one.
Yeah. I think that's why we still get so many kind of imaginative kind of new games, which people say it's a twist. It's a twist on this kind of game. I've seen it, but it does do kind of things slightly different. And I don't think somebody says, right, okay, like I was talking about in the last show, I was talking about Rear Window, and I don't think somebody took Mysterium and said, right, how do we take the Rear Window IP and make it like, how do I change Mysterium to make it like Rear Window? I think somebody just kind of like worked on a game idea, and then you would be aware that something like a Mysterium existed, but then they just kind of developed it kind of how they wanted to do it. So in terms of then the playtesting side of things, are you, as a person, would you consider yourself a fairly kind of analytical type person then? Are you kind of like a facts and figures type guy? Is that how you're kind of driven?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
There's kind of like, if you were to divide, I think, game design into two broad schools, you'd have people who design by numbers and people who design by feel. And I'm usually drawn towards the kind of games that are designed by numbers, or at least backed up by numbers. It's just very much the way my brain works. Allows me to make sense of things a lot easier if I can see patterns in it. Which is why one game that I'm working on is interesting, because it is very much kind of how there's not many kind of, you can't balance it. Like when I designed Swatch, I could balance all the card counts and the values and everything literally just by mathing it out.
Yeah.
And that was fine. But this is a cooperative game that is more based on an experience than balance. And you have to design by feel, and when you tweak it, it's not because this is overpowered, it's because people's perception when they do this is that it's not right. Therefore I have to change it, which is, it's very interesting.
Does that almost push you out of your kind of your Venn diagram kind of comfort zone? It's like you've kind of got board games I like to develop, and maths and analytics, and it's kind of all in this, and put an Excel spreadsheet in there as well, and you get comfort, and you're kind of going, well, I now need to say, right, people don't like this card because it's got a -3 on it, and people don't really like that minus because it's too much of a minus, but they can't tell. It doesn't actually analytically, it physically doesn't really make a difference to the gameplay, but people don't like having a card of -3 when everything else is kind of like a positive kind of integer instead. Have you been tapping into anything that is it Jeff Engelstein's been doing online? He's got a Substack going, and he talks about kind of analytics and probability and game design as well.
Yeah, I think I've looked at it a bit before, not recently, but I see it popping up, and it's always one of those things where I'm like, I need to go back to that, because there's a lot of really good kind of, what's the word? I guess thought leadership type things that people in the game design community are fully willing to just put out for free, because they don't. I think the great thing about kind of this industry is no one sees each other as competition, whether it's designers or publishers. And we could argue maybe for the larger publishers, but in the kind of indie publishers type scene, I never look at anyone at a convention across from me and be like, I have to sell to this person, because if they go there first, they're going to buy that game, then they're not going to buy my game. Like, when has a board gamer ever made an excuse to not buy more games?
I think it's because we still don't know what would define a successful game, or what generates a successful game. We're talking as we said, or you alluded to earlier, you almost like to approach game design with a little bit of kind of ignorance, because then you're not basing it on other things. And I think at the moment, case in point, your current Kickstarter campaign, you had no idea what was going to happen when you pressed the button on that, whether it was going to sit there at £500 for a couple of days, and then you were going to be, well, how do we promote it? And it's kind of gone where it is. It's kind of gone through the roof. And I think that there is a little bit of people kind of keep their minds open, because you don't really know where the next potentially big popular thing is going to be coming from. I mean, Heat. Again, spoke about Heat in the last episode, but I don't think if I'd said to people kind of like a year ago or a year and a half ago, one of the big games that people are going to be talking about is a racing game, which has some slight differences to how, say, like Flamme Rouge play or Formula D plays, people would be saying, shut up. And now for a while you couldn't get, Heat was hot. So bad. So when you're helping people out at the LudoQuest, do you have to kind of wear both hats? Do you have to are you wearing your analytical hat with them? Are you wearing your kind of your how the game makes you feel kind of hat with them? What are you kind of doing when you're kind of running those kind of things?
it very much depends on what the designer's looking for as well.
Mm.
Because the thing is, I then probably have 4 hats to wear, which gets very busy, chopping and changing them.
I just want to see you wearing 4 hats or what.
There'd have to be different hats as well, so people could
Yeah.
easily tell
What hat you had?
who I was being at the time. But yeah, I mean, you've got kind of it depends on what feedback the designer's looking for.
Right.
If they want to know whether something is balanced,
Yeah.
then you can say, oh, well, actually, I think this action gives you too much, or I think this path is pointless because, there's clearly a better choice.
Yeah.
Or they might just want to be, did you feel like you had agency when you were playing?
Mm-hmm.
Which is obviously quite a different. That doesn't necessarily come down to game balance. It comes down to, did I feel like the choices I was making mattered?
Yes.
And then I've got the kind of the designer side and the publisher side. So if someone wants to ask me advice as a fellow designer,
Yeah.
then I would say, oh yeah, well this is more kind of experimental, or this would be really cool because I don't think it's been done before. Or as looking at it as like a developer publisher type thing, I'd be like, well, like, do you want to sell this? Because 600 cards is really expensive to produce, and it might be a limiting factor.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, like looking at it from, I guess, like a product development type thing as well. So that's, I think, a big part of playtesting is what does someone want to get out of it? Because there's being a good playtester, as well as being a good like host as well.
So you're going to make sure that everybody's running, everybody's happy, and that first time people are kind of, they're not made to feel welcome, but they're actually feeling they're kind
Not
of
too
getting
welcome.
value.
I don't want them too
Well, you
comfortable.
don't. Yeah, no, you don't want people coming back. I was talking to my friend about this. Like the local game shop's got a lovely guy, but he's starting to get the case of kind of like it's kind of like what I call nerderoids, which are guys that hang around your shop but don't buy anything in your shop, but think by being your friend and hanging around at the counter, they're kind of generating business, and you're just like, you need to nip that in the bud.
You are doing the opposite.
Get your kind of money. Is it? How many? Is it? Do you also have to give people kind of talking tos as well to kind of get them over their own kind of anxiety about their game, or they're kind of thinking, well, this game's just not any good? Are there some people that you have to talk? Well, feedback is a specific thing, and it's not necessarily a personal thing about you and yourself. It's actually about how the game mechanics work. Do you have to kind of coach people on how to kind of keep on going if they've got a good idea? I mean, you must have seen some people who, they come along for a couple of weeks, it looks like they've got an amazing idea, and then you never see them again because they've just decided to bin it.
I mean, we get kind of people from both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
In that you have someone who comes along thinking that they've designed the next greatest game.
Yeah.
And it turns out that we're sitting in a board game cafe with like 600 games, and they've played, Scrabble.
Yeah.
Which is
I wouldn't want to incur the wrath of the Scrabble crowd.
When I say approach design with a bit of ignorance, there's such thing as too much ignorance.
Yeah.
But we'll happily point out that there's a whole world there of modern board games, and kind of how to approach that. But then also we have people who come along who have designed something really exciting and innovative, and they're just really that's just like self-deprecating. They're like, oh no, I didn't like this because this bit, this bit clearly doesn't work. I'm like, you're looking at this single bit that you've decided to breaks the entire game.
Yeah.
Everyone else is having so much fun.
Yeah.
That like sometimes we forget that we're meant to be playtesting these games, and
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh yeah, we'll wrap it up after round 3," and we're like, "No, we are going to the end."
Yeah.
That and we're enjoying this too much. So yeah, there's encouragement and there's advice, and I mean, yeah, sometimes you get people who come along. We try and have a rule that when someone attends for the first time, they don't playtest their game.
Yeah.
Because it gets them more of a feel as to who we are as a community.
Yeah.
And that they don't have to worry too much about getting their game played. They can just, get involved and chat to people.
Yeah.
But also it stops people who are just looking for publicity coming along, or want to take and not give, which we have had a few times. I had someone turn up once with a game that he was really excited that he'd developed, and so I sat down to play it with him. It was like a kind of multi-game in one system,
Yeah.
which is quite interesting. And the kind of the physical product of it was had that toy factor, as people like to say.
Yeah.
And then after we played it, he was like, "Oh," so I asked him what his plans were, and he was like, "Oh, it's actually on Kickstarter now." I was like, "Oh, okay." So I
You kicked him out, set his game on fire, and then threw it at him, didn't you?
we rotated around, and then I had a quick look on my phone and just I was like, "Oh, what's it doing on Kickstarter?" And it had like £26 funding for a £60,000 goal or something, and I was like, "Oh, okay." And then he never came back because all he wanted to do was come here, tell everyone that he had a Kickstarter running,
so that people could potentially back it. Do you have to go down that approach? Do you have to have kind of like a crowdfunding kind of 101? Do you get people saying, right, okay, this is exciting, this is where it goes, what do I do about crowdfunding? Or do you just say, look, that's a journey you're going to have to kind of go and investigate yourself?
I mean, we're quite lucky with our community. It's been running 5 years now, I think, and we've grown massively. Like post-pandemic, we used to meet once a month, and now we meet every week, and we have like a dozen people every week, which is amazing. Just people came out of the pandemic having designed countless games in their bedroom, and just they had a thirst to test it and play other people's games, which was amazing. And we've now kind of built up to a point where we have people from all different disciplines. So we have designers who have experience pitching to publishers. We've got designers who've had games signed. We've got designers who self-published, and then we've got publishers who sign games.
Wow.
And then we have hobby designers who aren't interested in publishing anything. They just are happy to design, and they get to a point where they go, that's done, on to the next one.
Wow.
And then we have people who are obviously looking to be published. So yeah, depending on what people's goals are, we can usually point them to someone in the right direction.
So out of the games that you've seen, are there any ones that you would say, yeah, this came from our place?
Ones that have been published. I mean, there's a few. So I believe you spoke to Richard of Crown of Ash fame.
Yes.
So I met Richard. I think crawling out of the pandemic. Actually, he started attending our sessions, and he brought along this gorgeously designed game that was, even in its like early prototypes, it just looked too good. And I asked him what his job was. He's like, I'm a graphic designer. I was like,
all right, okay, that figures.
That explains it. But I played that and I really enjoyed it. And then obviously that's done really well on Kickstarter. Yeah. And we've got Magnate by Naylor Games as well. James is a Croydon local.
Is he?
So I remember really early on, one of the first kind of big play tests I did was not just because of the size of the game. Was we did a blind play test of the rulebook.
Wow.
Which was really interesting because it was the four of us essentially trying to work out how to play.
Yeah.
Whilst James just literally sat in the corner and with a notebook and just wrote down in his pad, and we would kind of read a rule and glance over to him and be like, is this right? And his expression would not change. And he'd just be writing.
My experience with I think I played Magnet at, I think maybe AirCon 2019. And I think it was maybe round about just before. Was it maybe just before it was going to go to Kickstarter? But I rolled like dreadfully, like ones all the way through, to the point where we actually had to check the dice. It was so bad. And if you speak to James and remind him of my absolute failure at trying to play Magnet at the time, it was it was absolutely dreadful. But it's really good to see. James has got a game coming out soon, hasn't he? Another one which is it's an unusual kind of game based around pontoon and algebra, which makes me run a mile.
It's blackjack with equations,
yes.
which you can say those words and someone will immediately know whether they're in or they're out.
Yes.
I mean,
snake clowns for me. That's literally what that puts it together as.
The general advice is that when you start out as a publisher, especially if you're a self-publisher or indie publisher, start out with a nice small card game, because there's less moving parts, cheaper to produce, all that kind of stuff. Then as you get better known, you can expand and go for bigger games. So James decided to completely ignore that, and his first game was a metric brick.
Yes, a metric ton
of gorgeously designed buildings and 7 years in the making kind of masterpiece. And then he's following it up with a deck of cards. But that 21X is actually a game that debuted and was play tested at the Ludicrous.
Wow.
And that's how James discovered it. So the designer, Leo falls very quickly into that design by feel category, and he will just come up with a concept, however ludicrous, and then go, yep, that's a game. And then he'll turn around in a day or so and he'll come back with a game, and you'll be like, yeah, how does this work? How have you done this?
Yeah.
And he constantly impresses me with the kind of the games that he comes up with. These are just brutally simple but fascinating. And I'm absolutely awful at 21X. I'm not made for it. It's a game that I really want to be good at, but I can't.
It's like I'd really like to be good at rock climbing, but I know I've just not got the upper body strength to even consider kind of going near the... Yeah, I look at it and I'm just like, yeah, this looks absolutely fantastic, and I think it's going to do kind of pretty well. James he's got quite a weight on his shoulders at the moment because he's taken over the ITB stuff.
Yes. Yeah, he has. He's
interested in finding out how much hair he's potentially lost since he's kind of taken.
He hasn't been along for a few playtesting sessions, so he might look like a different man when he resurfaces.
He might be. But so, are you the type of designer then? It sounds to me that you're the type of designer then that if I gave you a theme just now, would you be able to pluck the idea of a game out of it, or would you just be, look, I really need to kind of go away and have a kind of a think about what I could do?
It depends. I think generally if I try to build a game around something, I find that I tend to lean more heavily on things for inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
I look to like existing examples, whereas if something kind of springs to me unbidden,
Yeah.
then I often find it's a bit more, I don't know, original.
Right.
Probably the best way to describe it. So yeah, there's been times when, you know, I mean, actually playing one of James's games, Game Jam, which is a game about designing games,
Yeah.
which
meta.
is in development at the moment, but it's excellent because you can play it as a game. It's kind of like a tableau building efficiency game.
Yeah.
But you end up with a combination of theme, mechanics, and components that then you have to kind of put into a category.
Yeah.
And the amount of times that we've played it and gone, like, that's actually a really good idea for a game. And yeah, we will have games that have been designed and brought to playtesting sessions that have sparked from games of Game Jam.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
And it's those kind of conversations. Sometimes you just need, like you said, a couple of prompts where you go, yeah, I guess a bit like improv. It's like, oh, here's a theme and here's a component. What can you make around that? And it's
so was Swatch pretty? What was the thing behind Swatch? Was Swatch kind of like, I like colours, I can actually make this into a pretty easy kind of maths kind of puzzle? I mean, because that I when I saw it, and there's one just round there sitting on my shelf. It's bright, it's colourful, it's garish, it's very kind of it puts you in. To me it's a mood game. Because you're interacting with the environment and you're affecting the colours around it, and people have kind of different colours, and it's bright and it's cheery, and there's a little bit of stress out there about, you know, kind of mixing your palettes and kind of mixing your kind of colours together. And to me, that seems to be, unless I'm reading it wrong, but it seems to be more feel than it is kind of maths. And you're going to tell me, no, if I very cleverly designed this game, it's heavy on maths, but it kind of gives you the impression of a feel type game.
I think it started out as very maths based, and then I realised that just because a game is balanced doesn't mean that it's fun. And I mean, the first kind of iteration of Swatch was there was only one aspect of that game design that survived, and it was the colours.
Oh right, okay.
And interestingly enough, the colours weren't even part of the gameplay.
Wow.
It was still kind of based around efficiency, and it was an unapologetic cube pushing game. Kind of, if you took Century Spice and just boiled it down to its purest concept of, I have this cube and I would like a different cube.
Yes.
I was just kind of following a bit of an experiment with something, and I was like, oh well, I'm going to set up a prototype with 4 players. Okay, I need 4 player colours. I'm a graphic designer, so my player colours always default to CMYK. Yeah. And so I set up a game where the 4 players had cyan, magenta, yellow, and black cubes. And we played it, and it was awful. and these were my best friends playing the game, which is normally like when you first design a game and you get them to play it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's great," and they were just like, "No, this is I'm doing things and I'm getting nothing from it."
Yeah.
So I literally took the only thing that excited me about it, which was the colours, and then that crossed over, and it kind of kept going. As I said, the efficiency aspect is definitely still there, but it's a very different game from what it used to be.
Would you revisit it again? As in, would you go back and do like an expansion or?
I've had a lot of thoughts about that, and there's a few things that I would really like to do. There's a few things I have already done. There's been a couple of playtests that I've had of a couple of extra modules for Swatch.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I would definitely like to revisit it. It is coming to the end of its print run.
Yes.
Very soon.
Yes.
There is not many copies left, which has got me thinking about it again. But one of the very interesting things that I've learned about Swatch is who actually plays it. And I've found since releasing it, I have a much better idea of who the audience for it was. So when I was marketing it on Kickstarter, I was marketing it as kind of, like an abstract strategy game. A light one that, you can get your kind of Euro fix but in a 30-minute game.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, it does do, but I've found that people respond to it much better when they go to a convention, which is where I do most of my sales now, and they look at it and they go, oh, this is about colour. Like, I'm in. And they sit down and they want to play it because they're drawn in by the aesthetic instead of the gameplay. And those people like the game a lot more, which I find fascinating.
But I'm quite a visual person as well, so to me, when I first saw Swatch, I was like, I'm in. It was that kind of, it's that Deadpool 2 moment, It's just here. Okay, well, you're in. Don't worry about it, kind of thing. because I've always had a bit of an artistic background, and something like this is going like, because, and, there's not enough people banging the kind of the CY drum as well, going, oh, this is actually how colour theory works. Oh, right, okay. And I found that like fascinating. It was educational as well at the same time. It was just the colours and kind of putting everything together, which was kind of wonderful for me. In terms of then, what made you decide in terms of like for the next game, for the follow-up game, which is the game that we're meant to have been talking about for the last 43 minutes and 52 seconds, but haven't. How did it come around? Because am I right in saying that Crumbs isn't your baby?
No.
Your baby is
not.
Currently making the cutest, adorable noises in the background, being gloriously entertained. But it's
yes, she is.
It's and I'm not gonna. It's Jay Antshirl, is that right? Who designed Crumbs. So how did that come about? Are they a Ludoquist graduate, or how did that kind of happen?
They are a South London local,
Right.
yes. But the way we actually met was an unsolicited DM on Twitter.
Wow.
Which is, everyone's favourite thing to receive. But in my case, it actually was. So yeah, John had been following me on Twitter.
Yeah.
As a local designer / publisher, and also I like small box games and micro games, and he had a love of button shy games, and he just shot me a message once saying, oh, I don't know if you've ever considered publishing other people's games, but I've been designing a load of 18 card games in my spare time, and I was wondering if you fancied taking a look at them.
That's cool.
So I said, oh yeah, I'd be well up for that. I said, we've got, our playtesting group that meet at the Ludoquist. We could meet up and I can sit down and play a load. And I thought, worst case scenario, if they're all terrible, at least I've recruited an extra person for the playtesting group.
It could be a serial killer. I've just invited a murderer, maniac to our board game club, and we're going to be in the news.
Best case scenario.
We got game out of it.
I get to play some great games, we sat down and I played Crumbs, which at the time was called Breadhead.
Okay. And
it was just one of those things that I just immediately went, oh, this is fantastic! I love this. He told me originally about the theme, and I was like, okay, I'm intrigued because that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
And then when we played it, the tactile aspect of of laying the cards over one another just really clicked with me. And the next day I sent him a message like, can you send me the print and play files for that, please? And then I think that again the next day I made it and was playing it, and I continued to play it. I just had it on me, so that if I had some spare time, I'd just get out and have a quick game. And you know, it was still quite rudimentary. It was John's own art that he'd done on essentially like paint, but it had just kind of like that really, really simple, strong visual that captured me.
So was there a lot of difference between the game of Crumbs that was put down in front of you on that day and the one that's going to Kickstarter? Was there a lot of changes that you made, or was it more in kind of aesthetics and presentation rather than kind of reworking rules and things?
I think when it came to like rules development, the game was in a really strong place, and I think all it needed was a bit of spit and polish. I mean, John was quite active in other design communities as well, including like the Button Shy Discord. And I mean, if you want to get feedback on an 18-card game, there's no better place to do it. He already had like a pool of people that he had sent prototypes to, who were playing it regularly. So it was already in a really good place. And I think my role was more of kind of like a developer role, where I just kind of like streamlined bits or picked up on pain points or like player assumptions, and then said, oh, you know, if people are forgetting this rule a lot, then it's clearly a sign that it's not natural. Because I think one of the great things about the game is that even though it's only 18 cards, it still feels very thematic, and all of the kind of the actions that you're doing make sense. They kind of, nothing draws you out too much of kind of the feel of making sandwiches. And so we wanted as few rules to get in the way of that as possible.
I think it's very the thing about the game, it's very tactile. And I, you know, with me kind of reviewing kind of more games on a regular basis, there's some games that I get kind of straight away, and there's other games that's a bit of a struggle, because I enjoy a good theme, and I can get around kind of how a theme works and stuff like that. But there's some things that just kind of click for you straight away when you're playing a game, and it's like, I understand why I am doing this because it represents me doing this, and this makes kind of complete sense to me. Like I was playing Viticulture, again on Friday, which is, you know, one of my, I would say, quite easily one of my favourite games. Yeah,
I love it.
But
it's fantastic.
The act of kind of like planting, harvesting your grapes, aging your grapes, changing them to wine, shipping them out, all follows, regardless that you're physically not doing those kind of actions in real life. You kind of get the flow, and it kind of works. It kind of understands. I've played another game recently, which is all about kind of, which was kind of like markets and goods and pricing and stuff like that. And it just didn't, it kind of took longer to kind of get in, because there was still a disconnect between kind of like how the game themed. What I like with Crumbs was the fact that it's like, here's some bread, right? I'm going to put bread down. I can put as many bread down as I want. And now on my next action, I'm going to get some eggs, and I'm putting eggs down on top of the bread that needs eggs. And then on my next action, I'm going to get some cheese. And then my next action, I'm going to put another bit of bread down. And then my final action, I've got to toast this bread. And then I'm checking my cards to see if I've done like how many sandwiches I've made in that turn to satisfy. Now, it's not the whole order, but just a sandwich. And then if I've got it right, I get my 5 actions back, and I get to keep making sandwiches. And as long as I'm and to me, that is the act of going into a sandwich shop. I'm trying to keep my customers happy. As long as like I'm not I'm not kind of trying to create your entire order, but what I'm doing is I'm showing you that I'm making progress. And as long as I've got, here's another one of your sandwiches just made, and I'm just finishing off the last of your sandwiches. Meanwhile, I'm getting on with the second sandwich, and I'm kind of creating actions. But what I've got to do is I've got to make sure I've got enough ingredients. So once I've successfully made a sandwich, I'm literally going to have to top up the ingredients that I've got. And I do that by recycling the kind of the sandwiches that I've made for the customers. So there's kind of, but this all seems like I could explain this to somebody and they could imagine how the gameplay would work quite quickly. What's interesting to me with Crumbs is the fact that it's the limitation of the cards that you have, is that you could have quite literally had a deck of 18 cards for all of the ingredients. You could have then had a deck of cards for the orders. You could have had kind of more items and more ingredients. And the fact is that even like simple things like, depending on the difficulty that you have, changes the number of ingredients that you have to play with.
Yeah.
So that on the back of the ingredients cards, it basically has a number of orders. So you've got, it usually has 2 customers, and each of the customers usually has at least, a couple of sandwiches that they want to order. But what you have to do is you end up starting off with 2 kind of in customer order cards. So you've got 4 customers to serve, with the chance that you're also going to have to bring in a third set of 2 customers to serve as well. But by doing that, you're actually reducing the amount of ingredients that you have available to make certain sandwiches too. But me explaining to this to you just now, without you seeing the game, you can probably, even listening along to this just now, you can probably imagine how the game kind of works. If I said to you, there's a row of ingredients in the top row, and then on the left, there's going to be either 1 card or 2 cards with customer orders on them. On the middle in front of me, there's a couple of spaces where I've got a prep area where I can make my sandwiches. And you're actually physically making the sandwiches. You're putting in ingredients one on top of another. So you actually have a physical representation of the sandwich. Then on the right-hand side, once you've completed a sandwich, you put it on the right-hand side. And then you can only bring out one. You've got another action which allows you to retrieve 1 ingredient from the pantry at one time. And it all kind of makes sense. Is that kind of it, Scott? Am I?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, one of the joys of these kind of games is that you can sum up the game so easily and so quickly. And it's one of those games that, you can say, oh, these are your 3 actions. Mm. And this is what you're trying to make. Mm. And then if you just let people get on with it, they'll lose, because in a weird way the game is designed to force people to lose. Yes. Because in losing you kind of take stock and you're like, okay, well then why did I lose?
Yes.
Oh, it's because I didn't have enough of this ingredient. Yes. Or I forgot to restock this ingredient in time to place it. And then you can go back again and try again, and each time you get better, and you identify the things that you can do to become more efficient.
And it's a pretty easy proposition. I've got a cat counter. What nobody knows is during this conversation, Scott is repeatedly getting visited by his cat. And he's very, very gently.
Actually, they're all different cats, every single one of them.
Single one. He's got more cats than Frank West. Because Frank West, as everybody knows, doesn't own any cats. They're just hand puppets that he pretends he's got cats. We're calling you out, Frank. You have no cats. You've built a career on cats now, but you've no cats. But every so often this cat goes in front of the camera, and Scott very gently kind of lifts the cat away, like, this is the last time, and then you're getting punted. Yeah, but no, it's the case that it's a very, very easy concept to show. I mean, how when you were kind of going out and, I guess, asking people to help you market the Kickstarter, as in preview the game. The cat's there again. The cat is looking up. It's back again. It's looking up. You can just stay. Just stay. How easy was it just to say, I'm making a game about making sandwiches? I mean, would you like to play a game about me? I was being a difficult arse because I went, I've got celiac, so have you got a gluten-free version? It's like, it's made out of cardboard. Stop being difficult.
You were the equivalent of people when I said, I'm designing a game about mixing colour, and everyone's just like, oh, well, bet colourblind people can't play it.
I was that person. Obviously slightly convert, but was it quite easy just to kind of like you didn't have to do a huge explanation about the kind of the game and how it kind of worked?
No, I think it's just one of those it's one of those themes that just excites people. I mean, I would hazard a guess and say that the majority of the population enjoy eating food. Which gives you quite a big audience to start with. But yeah, there's just something.
It's almost addictive eating food.
the kind of the combination of the theme and then once they link it with like the aesthetic that it kind of has that that charming aesthetic. It just draws people in. They kind of want to please all these cheery little people in the queue, not knowing that they're ultimately going to disappoint every single one of them. Ultimately.
But the thing is, and this is the other thing, is anybody that was if this goes out onto tables, if it's being played in the Ludicrous and people are walking past, or or at Aircon or Aircon West or Tabletop Scotland or wherever, then people walking past the tables are going to look at that and go, "It's a sandwich game." There's not going to be, there's
going to be no question.
I see Emperor Zargath has been taking over the fifth system again. Cheeky man. I don't think that is pretty obvious. Have you been surprised by the level of the funding level so far? Because it just seems to be going great guns.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, like the imposter syndrome was real in the couple of days leading up, and I was at the point where when I pressed the button, I was genuinely unsure what was going to happen. I mean, I had kind of goals that I'd love to achieve based on Swatch's performance, but I also knew that realistically, Swatch was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So I've been quite busy in those last 3 years, and I would hope that would have some impact on the success of Crumbs.
Yeah.
I've been to plenty of shows, built up a community. It just I needed them to turn up when it mattered, and the response was amazing. I remember John was like, "Oh, have you got any kind of goals that you'd love to hit?" And I was like, well, I'd love to match Swatch's funding.
Yeah.
Crumbs is a smaller game, it's a cheaper game.
Yeah.
So I'd need more people to get the same amount of money. That's that's a given. So I'd love to do that. And then I said, my dream goal is to hit 1,000 backers, because I just think that's
a nice
that's a
number.
real milestone.
Yeah.
I've got 3 weeks. I'm sure I'll be able to beat Swatch. And well, I mean, we're just over 24 hours in, and we're 80% of the way to beating Swatch.
That's pretty cool.
What Swatch did in a month. So it's it's been I couldn't have asked for a better start, really.
So, what is the price of a sandwich in Crumbs then? What's how much is it?
It is £12, which is incredibly expensive if you're up in Scotland, but that's your average price if you're down.
Literally the price of a sandwich in London. I don't go south of the liver. I don't go south of the river. £12, and that will get you a fully production copy of Crumbs. Ships to anywhere in the world, and then we've also got the custom order, which is become a named customer featured in every copy of Crumbs with a custom illustration by artist Rory Muldoon. Rory's fantastic, isn't he?
Oh, incredible. I mean, you know, a vast amount of Crumb's success is down to his artwork, because I knew I wanted Rory from the beginning, because I said that John's artwork may have been simple, but it was really effective. It communicated exactly what it needed to.
Yeah.
And I essentially just sent him what John had made. I was like, I want this, but in your style.
I want Rory. Yeah, because Rory was involved in Tinderblocks.
Yes. Yeah, and that was a big part of
Tinderblocks.
You know, I said Tinderblocks is very flat graphics, but it still feels 3D.
So lovely.
And I was like, I need that.
Yes.
Because the stacking element of, you know, wafer thin cards, but being able to make them look kind of isometric.
Yes.
And ending up with a 3D sandwich is, it's a hugely like visual draw that people can look at that. Like you said, people look at it at a table and they immediately know what it is.
Sandwich.
But it has a much bigger presence than it is. You know, the box is going to be about this big, like it's pocket sized.
And for the purpose of the tape, Scott is saying it's going to be about the size of it's actually not much. It's not much size difference between a kind of a mobile phone. It's actually smaller than a mobile phone box, pretty much.
I mean, the production box is going to be slightly bigger because it's going to be a 2-piece box instead of a tuck box, because they're just a bit high quality. And, you know, obviously it's going to have space for sleeving the cards, because I'm never going to release another game that cannot fit sleeved cards in the box. Never get the end of it.
Heard that before.
But yeah, it's you know, the box is really small, but the components, you know, are minimal. But then the experience you get out of it vastly outweighs the kind of the individual components, I guess. Like when you have it out on the table. When I was doing demos at UK Games Expo, one of the most common comments was when I said, "Oh, it's an 18 card game," and they're like, "No, there's more than 18 cards here." I was like, "No, there literally isn't. You've just used every single one of them several times."
Wow.
And I think that is the real strength of John's designs. And having played others of his, I will say that he can make the most out of very little. And that was one of the things that appealed to me for Crumbs, and it's what makes me keep coming back. Is just, you know, is that kind of minimalist aspect, which obviously I'm, you know, a fan of.
Slightly biased.
And then, you just get so much out of it. You kind of forget how small the game is.
Yeah. So at the moment we're going to have about 20 days to go. We will make.
Oh, I have no idea what I'm doing for the rest of those 20 days.
No idea. But if people have listened along tonight and they want to find where you exist on the internet webs, where do you exist on the internet webs?
I exist wherever they'll let me. I'm Facebook, Instagram. I'm still going to call it Twitter. Sorry. I'm at Minerva Tabletop on most social media, or I'm minervatabletop.co.uk.
There we go. And we'll make sure that we put all those links in the show notes alongside the current Kickstarter campaign link in the show notes as well. If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, then just go to the internet webs and search for We're Not Wizards, and you'll find us in all the different places. If you want to keep up on our reviews that we write, as well as our podcasts that we record for the reviews that we write, I mean, we record them so they're in podcasts, you can go to we'renotwizards.co.uk. We're also on all the different places, Instagram and X and Twitter and Threads and Squish and Douche and Up and Down and Cable and Picture and Satellite and Tabletop Leg and everything. All the various. Just search for We're Not Wizards, you'll find us. And if you like what you've listened to, then please consider going to your podcast catcher of choice and give us a rating or a review. It's been a little time since we've had a review, so if you hadn't dropped a review on Apple Podcasts, then please consider doing that. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, just go ahead and do that. It makes me very, very happy. But if you are going to be giving us a rating or review, don't give us 10 stars because it does make me big-headed, but don't give us 1 star because it makes me cry, and you don't want me crying into my sandwich. Give us something in the middle, like 5, because it's average. It's just a little bit average. But the person who's not been average tonight is rather wonderful, rather fantastic. Scott Lowe-James. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
There's only 2 more things to
Enjoyed
do. First thing, remember, we're many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Scott?
Not last time I checked.
Good. Make sure you check regularly. It's important. And the second thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from Scott. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.
As a goodbye from me, remember, stay safe. Roll 6s. Make something awful. Not making something awful. Make something wonderful. Make it with lettuce and ham and cheese and egg and toasted bread and untoasted breading. Make sure you get some gluten-free bread in there, because otherwise it will be a disaster if it comes around my house. But until the next time, goodbye.
A wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.